Hello and welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. My name is Pooja. Today we are going to talk about the Battle of Haifa, as it has been in the news for quite some time. As on 23rd of September we celebrate the Haifa Day, it becomes of utmost importance that we know about it. What is the background of it? Why we celebrate the valor and the courage of the Jodhpur Lancers and the Mysore Cavalry. So let us move ahead and talk about this particular slide, which deals with the points of discussion. We will know about Haifa, the background, as Battle of Haifa was basically a part of World War I. And into the battle, we will look what has actually happened in the battle, the heroes, what was the outcome, post-independence scenario, the contemporary value, and the question as well. Moving ahead, let us talk about the news. I have already introduced it, but Israeli envoy pays tribute to Indian soldiers at the 104th anniversary of Battle of Haifa, which was celebrated this year itself. Moving ahead, let us talk about the city of Haifa. Haifa is a city in northwestern Israel, alright, and it is on the northern slopes of Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel, the northern slopes, it consists of the mountainous region of Haifa, and of course there is a port section on the bay of Haifa. So Haifa can be called as a port city as well. It is the principal port of the country and it is lying along the Bay of Haifa overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. Haifa for the first time ever mentioned in the Talmud. Okay, and that was from the 1st to 4th century. It was named as 𝐈𝐀𝐒. Alright. Moving ahead, another very important point over here is you have to know the position of Mount Carmel, because Mount Carmel is going to be of a lot of significance when we are going to discuss the battle. Moving ahead, now the town of Haifa was conquered in 1100 by the Crusaders, okay, and they named it differently. As Haifa has a lot of history, a very rich history with respect to the capturing of it. It's a very rich port city, so we have to know about it. In later times, it was taken by Napoleon in 1799. Ibrahim Pasha, the Egyptian general, also captured Haifa in 1839, but he surrendered it to the Ottomans in 1840. Then, after the Allied powers won this particular Battle of Haifa, it was with the British, okay, in 1918. So here is the Battle of Haifa that we are going to talk about. Moving ahead, let us talk about the background. We know that by the year 1980, World War I was at its peak. Central power consisted of how many countries? Specifically, the major name should be remembered. Germany, Ottomans, that is Turkey is also there, Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria. Okay, so remember these. And if we talk about the Allied powers were comprising of Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Canada, Japan, and the USA. So these two sections were at war with each other. Battle of Haifa is a part of World War I only. So German-Turkish forces had the hold of Haifa in the year 1918. And the Allied forces, also the Central powers, both were trying to get a hold of the many strategic port cities, mountainous area, whatever they could find in order to win in the World War I. So Haifa was very strategically located, and because it had rail access and as well as harbor, so it was an extremely strategic point, and that is why it had to be captured. So the Allied forces had planned to annex Haifa, Nazareth and Damascus. So Haifa and Nazareth are in present-day Israel. If we talk about Damascus, it is in Syria. Okay, it's the capital of Syria. So remember this. Alright, moving ahead. Now, if we talk about how did the Allied powers get successful, first of all, we need to mention 15th Cavalry Brigade of the British Empire. So, 15th Cavalry Brigade of the British Empire was designated this task of capturing Haifa. Cavalry means soldiers who fight on horseback with spears, lances, okay, and this comprised of the 15th Cavalry Brigade comprised of the imperial service troops from the princely states of Hyderabad, Mysore, Patiala, Jodhpur and Alwar as well. And this was known as the Imperial Service Cavalry Brigade. Alright, moving ahead, more to it, the Turks, Austrians and Germans, they occupied the heights of Mount Carmel, and because of that they had an upper hand against the allied powers. One thing that we have to understand over here, that this particular battle is also one of the last battles which was fought with the help of cavalry and against machine guns and modern artillery, specifically if we talk about the modern military history. Alright, so several artilleries and machine guns were mounted on the lower slopes of Mount Carmel. Suppose this is the Mount Carmel, and here in the lower slopes they had their machine guns. Alright, also they had the advantage of mountainous and hill ranges, which was a no-go terrain for specifically cavalry. Because the terrain was so challenging, cavalry was not supposed to be there. And Turks had deployed most of their machine guns in the lower slopes. Artillery, that is artillery modern, it's like a small tank only, but not very developed. So artillery used to be put at 4 different places. Okay, so Mysore Lancers, they had a task to take a hold of the machine guns. Mysore Lancers had the task to go from the east and take a hold of the machine guns, and they also had to provide fire cover to Jodhpur Lancers. So Jodhpur Lancers had to attack from the north and take the city of Haifa. This was the plan. Okay, so Jodhpur Lancers, during the charge from the north, they had to capture Mount Carmel and the city of Haifa as well. So this was the coordination. Alright, just understand it from the point of view of a story. Moving ahead, another very important part, that on the afternoon of 23rd September, a squadron of the Mysore Lancers attacked the Austrian battery of light field guns. Mysore Lancers, that means they were carrying lances. Basically, it's a spear-shaped weapon, usually carried by soldiers on horseback. So they attacked the Austrian battery of light field guns. And Jodhpur Lancers launched the main mount attack on the rear guard of the German machine gun, which blocked the road. And the Jodhpur Lancers came under the machine gun and artillery fire. Because one thing we have to understand over here, that Mysore Lancers as well as Jodhpur Lancers, they were fighting a war against modern weapon with very obsolete weapons. That is why this battle is very important, right? And many horses, they were not stopped by the machine guns as well. It was like a miracle. The spirit of the cavalry was unprecedented, and it even also surprised the defenders, the central powers. Moving ahead, Jodhpur Lancers, they continued their charge towards the town, and Mysore Lancers also followed them. So this was the bravery. Together, the two regiments captured 1350 Germans and Ottoman prisoners. Remember, this was a fight against modern military, weapons were so modern, with the central powers, allied powers just had lances and cavalry. And then their own casualties, that means the central powers casualties, amounted to 8 dead and 34 wounded. So this is the beauty of this word, why we are discussing it. Now we discuss the heroes. Of course, the entire cavalry, Mysore as well as Jodhpur Lancers and the 15th Brigade, all were heroes, but there were certain people who stood out, and Major Dalpat Singh was one of them. He attained martyrdom at the Battle of Haifa, and he has his story told in history books of Israel as well. If we talk about his story, he is anointed as hero of Haifa. Once he succumbed to injuries, Captain Aman Singh Rathore, who had rallied the men, and liberated the Haifa city. Once he succumbed, so Captain Aman Singh Rathore rallied the men to finally capture the city. Indian soldiers were armed only with lances and cavalry sabers and faced machine guns, fire from well-entrenched Turk and German soldiers, making history because, again, I am reiterating, it was a fight against modern military weapons, just with lances and cavalry. Remember this. Moving ahead, more to the story, if we talk about the outcome, The Battle of Haifa not only left the Ottoman and Turks, of course the Turks, smarting, but it also broke down the morale of them, and which led to armistice being signed by not only the Turks but also the Germans. Also, one thing that is not a lot talked about the significance of this war or the battle or the outcome of this battle was that it opened the way for grant of King's Commission to as officers to Indians, because before this it was based on the premise of racial superiority that Indians are not skilled enough to become leaders. But Battle of Haifa changed the narrative and entry to Sandhurst was opened. Soon after the war, the Prince of Wales Royal Indian Military College was founded in 1922 to prepare the applicants, for the training of the applicants. Moving ahead, another very important fact over here we have to know is what happened to them post-independence. Now, after independence, as the princely states, they merged into India as a union, then it was said to disband all regular and irregular erstwhile state forces cavalry units. And it was not the only thing, but also raise a new horse cavalry regiment because it is a cultural heritage of India. Now, it was designated as the 61st Cavalry. The regiment raised in Jaipur in 1953, comprised of Jodhpur and Mysore Lancers, those who fought in the Battle of Haifa. Moving ahead, one of the world's last remaining, one of the world's last remaining horse-mounted regiment, and they have earned a Padma Shri, 11 Arjuna Awards, 9 Asian Games medal, a gold medal in Polo World Cup against Pakistan. But in 2020, it was decided to convert this unit into a full-fledged armored regiment in order to cut cost and also to modernize. So this was based on the 2016 𝐏𝐤𝐒 committee report. Remember, 𝐏𝐤𝐒 committee report, only on that it was done. Moving ahead, now contemporary value is a lot, because we see that Delhi's Teen Murti Chowk celebrates the valor of the martyrs at Battle of Haifa, and this was named as Haifa Chowk in 2018, this year was the centenary of the Battle of Haifa. In 2017, Prime Minister of India visited Haifa with his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu, and this was the first ever by any Indian Prime Minister, showing that the linkage of Israel and India is bound by the Battle of Haifa. Israel also issued a postage stamp to commemorate the Sikh, Indian and British soldiers during victorious War of Haifa, and every year we celebrate the Haifa Day on 23rd September. Remember this. Moving ahead, let us talk about another very important facet. Film on India's role in Battle of Haifa is in works. It will be shot in real location across Israel. So this is attached with contemporary value. Now let's move on to our question. Answer this question. I will take your names in the next segment. Hold on those who have answered my last question correctly. Every year, the Haifa Day is celebrated in India on 20th September, 21st September, 22nd September, 23rd September. Okay. So now we talk about the people who have answered the last question correctly. Okay. Just stay with me. Those who have not, they can move on. So it was, how are tribes designated as scheduled tribes? That was the question. Answer was PVTGs. Option D was correct. Aishu has answered it correctly. Drishti, Abhyas, Abhay, Kanchan, Faizu, Rahul, Tushita, Kanishk, Jalajakshi, also Anuj, Swaraj, Karuchola, Simi, and Sudarshan, Dhirendra, also Sandeep, then Neha, Divyani, Prapti. I might not be able to take all the names, but some I might be. Shivangi, Raghav, Pallavi, Satish, Divyanshi, Mini, Riya, Malana, then Madhusudan, Diana, Karishma, Arishmita, Debashish, Devu, Aditya, Rupal, Prasad. Yes, you all have answered it correctly. Thank you so much for watching. Answer this question as well. I will take your names in the next segment. Thank you.